Sara Lohse, thank you so much for being a guest on the Talking Silkworm podcast.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, I'm really excited to have you on because there are 2 points that are very interesting for me that you cover. One of them is not going to be talked about in this podcast, which is caffeine and coffee. I see you are a coffee fan. But the one we're going to be covering in this podcast episode is storytelling and how to incorporate stories into your branding and your brand story. As I was mentioning before we hit record, everybody tells you gotta do storytelling. You have to include storytelling. You have to tell stories. Nobody tells you how. Yeah, that's an issue. Before we dive into that, tell us a little bit more about yourself and how you ended up working with branding through storytelling or building stories and brands.
Yeah, my background was in marketing. I worked for an ad agency. I was the director of marketing for a financial company. And I ended up accidentally getting booked as a guest on one of the biggest finance podcasts in the country to tell a stupid story about a tattoo I got on holiday once. And it was a very bizarre experience, but the host interviewed me in such an artistic way that it drew so much value and so much just meaning from this story that I didn't even realize was there myself. And just from that experience, I felt like I learned on the spot how to tell a good story and how to make a story sound like it is a good story. And I kind of just got obsessed. I was already a little bit in the podcast space, and podcasting is a story-driven medium. And I went all in. So I wrote a book on storytelling. I launched a podcast production company. I coach people on how to be better podcast guests, better storytellers. And I just kind of just went all for it and never looked back.
That sounds great. So you kind of fell into it amazingly.
I absolutely fell into it.
Okay, that's the best way to get to things, just by surprise.
I agree.
Sara, my first question is going to sound silly to listeners, but you know it is not silly because everybody speaks about storytelling, but nobody has clarity on what it means. So what is storytelling and what is not storytelling?
Actually, I like that question, and I've actually never been asked that before. And I'm going to answer it more out of like, what is storytelling in the way that I use it and the way that I teach it. And I think that we overthink storytelling a little bit, especially with everybody talking about storytelling. And I'll have people ask me like, well, how do I write a good story? And I think that right there is not what storytelling is, because we're not novelists. We're not authors. We're not trying to create a story and create some different world. We're just talking about our life and our experience. So I think what storytelling is from just this standpoint is talking about what you've been through and what's happened in your life and the experiences that have shaped you. It's not trying to come up with these stories and trying to come up with ways to connect with people, if that makes sense.
I'm going to give you a tricky question here. And you have worked as a podcast producer yourself, so you have an idea of what I'm going to ask you is, a lot of podcasts say they want to focus on people's stories and do storytelling. And what they do is just like they ask a set of questions that do not have a thread. They are disconnected. Like they just go with the flow. So the conversation speaks about everything and nothing in particular. And usually hosts will say, oh, it's because I want to know the person's journey. But it was mostly just like a random conversation. So how can we shape, and I think I'm jumping ahead in the topics, but let's dive right into it. How can we like shape a conversation into a story? Either if I am the guest in a show or I am the host in a show. So it is not just another, like same as the other 10,000 interview podcasts.
Yeah. So when I am a podcast producer, I run a podcast production house, and we specialize in launching podcasts. So we create the whole concept and design what it's going to look like and sound like. And we use a lot of strategy in it. And I think to do what you're saying and to really have that thread, it comes back to the beginning process and having a strategy in place. We call it like in sales, they have the unique selling proposition. We say unique listening proposition. And when we're launching a show, the first thing that we do is figure out what that unique listening proposition is. And it kind of becomes like the brand promise of a podcast. And it's every single episode that you listen to is going to hit on this promise. Like, we promise you're going to get this out of it. And I think people skip that. And I'm a business podcast. I'm going to talk about business. You come on and you tell your business story. And that's why they all end up sounding the same. But if you start with that strategy and really plan out, well, yes, you're a business podcast, but what is it about your show that's different? What are you going to talk about that's different from all those other business podcasts? What is going to be unique? And then you tie those questions and that conversation around that one thing. So it's not hearing their entire journey. It's hearing specific stories from this piece of their journey that every guest has in common.
Thank you. You just said what I always insists podcasters to do is like, don't tell everything. Just like focus on the particular aspect that you want to share with your listeners, and like pick that person's brain. Like that person can tell you a story about how they tackled that particular aspect or that particular problem. But it doesn't have to be like saying everything, like when they were born and what influence got like in their life, and then like what their life story, family story, and then like business story. That's a different thing. That's a different thing. Okay,
Yeah.
I'm glad you pointed it out.
We when we're coaching our hosts, we tell them that they are not allowed to ask the question, which is just tell us about yourself. And that is because we've seen that happen so many times where people will just take that question and just turn this into like my biopic. And here is my entire resume. I was born on a Saturday at 2 a.m. on Long Island. And here's every single thing that's happened since. Or they go through their entire resume of every job that they've ever had. And that is not what we're looking for. We've had people that were guests on shows that we've hosted talk for 12 minutes straight before we can even like get a word in. And that is not valuable to anybody. So I definitely agree with what you're saying, and having that strategy in place ahead of time and having a real plan for what that content is going to focus around, that's going to help you like rein that in. And just don't say, introduce yourself. Tell us about yourself.
There is another aspect, going back to podcasts, particularly in storytelling, and it is some content can be easily turned into stories. Mm-hmm. But some content is hard, or I will think is hard. You can let me know if I'm wrong. It's hard to turn into stories, yes? If I'm speaking about like mental health, or if I'm speaking about like entrepreneurship, I think there's potential there to turn stories into podcast stories, yes, or to create storytelling. But if I'm speaking about real estate, or like something that is like very, very heavy in data, or that's like just very boring, quote unquote, because it's maybe an industry that has a lot of like very specific information, specific vocabulary. It could be, for example, law, I don't know, like crypto or AI, stuff like that. Is there a way for those industries to use storytelling as well?
Absolutely. And I think part of that comes down to where you're trying to tell that story. A podcast is a storytelling medium. It is not a place for data. And of course, you can weave in data and have information, but we don't need your podcast to get that data. We can get that from Google. We can get that from ChatGPT. The only thing that we cannot Google, the only thing that ChatGPT cannot give us is the stories that you have around it. And I think if you're trying to focus on that information, you're going to lose your audience because it's just not going to draw them in. There's no connection there. It's not engaging in the way that a story is. And there's always going to be a story somewhere. I think if you have a topic that you can't tell a story about, you really don't have any business talking about that topic because you don't have experience in it. But if you're talking about real estate and you're trying to get some concept across that might seem like it is harder to understand, talking about it through stories and how did you learn this information? Not just what is the information. How did you come across it? How has knowing this impacted the things that you're doing? How have you used this information to shape the decisions that you're making? Anything that is just talking about experiences that you've had and things that you've done is a story. And it goes back to what I said before. We overthink it. We think that a story has to be something profound or something really long. It has to be several minutes and have characters and a plot line. And it doesn't. Just what happened. You were there to walk us through it.
Okay, I'm gonna push back, not on my behalf, but on behalf of like listeners, because I'm sure you have worked with CEOs there, and CEOs are driven by statistics and ROIs and like KPIs and all these things. So like they want numbers, and they process the information in numbers. So like on behalf of CEOs and technically minded people, they say, "Hey, I need my data in there because one that like that's the way I process the information." And then that's what makes they might think that's what makes the information trustworthy. Yeah, because like I'm giving you like factual numbers.
Mm-hmm.
Is there a way to balance that, like sharing the story, telling what happened, putting that experience out there, and putting a little bit of like those hard numbers?
Absolutely. I think you need a balance of both. And it's not don't give information, but the information is out there. So what you're trying to add to the conversation is your interpretation of it. And you're using stories to explain that information. Because if you just threw a bunch of numbers at me, a bunch of statistics at me, that might not mean anything to me. I might not know it. I might not understand it. It might be above my head. It might just be something that goes in one ear and out the other. But if instead you take a step back and talk about that information in a way that is applicable, how did you use this information? How can I use this information? Why is this relevant? Why is this important? And just take it like that step further. Don't just give me the data. Explain it to me in how it's relevant and how it can be used in the real world.
Do you happen to have an example? You don't have to say names, of course, of a podcast or another type of content creator you have worked with that has successfully transformed information into storytelling to connect with their audience?
I think there's so many out there. All of the good podcasts do that. The podcast that I was on that taught me how to tell my story was Stacking Benjamins, and that's an amazing platform for creativity and storytelling in the finance space. But I think the place my brain always goes is Austin Kleon. He's an author. He is one of my favorite authors, and he teaches creativity. And his books, they're short, they're easy to read, and they lay out all of this information in a way that is so engaging. He uses pictures, he uses illustrations, and he turns the idea of creativity into a story. And he does it in such an artful way.
How can a person with a heavy mindset towards business and towards numbers lean into that? Because I'm thinking, for example, of lawyers I've worked with. Like, they are very rigid in how they, and also it's because the profession requires it, like very rigid in terms of how they portray themselves, what information they manage, what they leave out. How can a CEO or a professional creating a podcast lean a bit more into that artistic side? Yeah, it's like to be more open on how they communicate things.
Yeah, I've been in the finance space forever. I am an accredited financial counselor, and a lot of the shows that I produce are financial. And finance is one of those highly, highly regulated industries, just like law and health and all of those industries. And I get a lot of people that are afraid to create any type of content for that reason, because it is regulated. And I think we just have to get past that fear a little bit. If you have been in the space for long enough, you've been in whether it's law or finance, whatever it is, you know what you're not supposed to say. And all that those regulations are trying to do is protect the public. They don't want you giving direct advice to people that you don't know, because yes, it worked for someone, but it's not going to work for everybody. One size fits nobody well. So if you just know what not to say, there's so much freedom in what you are able to say just by leaving out the bad. And if you're not able to give direct advice, what you're really trying to do is help people just understand concepts. So law concepts are hard to understand. Financial concepts, those are hard to understand, but stories aren't. So if you're trying to get me to understand the importance of investing in my IRA, if you just tell me that I'll get this percentage return every year and eventually it'll be a lot of money, that's great. But tell me more. Tell me what that means. Tell me about the people that you've worked with that have invested in this, and now they're living the retirement that I envision for myself. And talk to me about my own future and what that's going to look like, and how I can be living my life later, and how I can live the dreams that I have and be able to afford it. Talk about that. Talk about what it means from a just experience standpoint, not just what those numbers are, not just what those facts are.
This episode is not going to be a crash course on storytelling, because that is a very wide, very, very wide area. But tell us about maybe one exercise podcaster or business owner can start implementing now, so they can start transforming both their mindset and their discourse from like the technical data driven stuff into stories.
To find those stories, because you have them, they're in your brain somewhere. You just have to kind of unbury them. One thing that I recommend doing is, if you want to tell a story, it's for a purpose. Like, you are trying to get some idea across, you're trying to get people to understand something. So it's like that classic line, begin with the end in mind. What is the message that you're trying to get across? And like, what is your goal for telling this story? So instead of picking a story first and just deciding to tell it, pick a lesson, pick a message. And when you write those down, just start thinking about what experiences you went through that taught you that lesson, that taught you this thing that you're trying to get other people to understand. Because if you can walk people through how you learned it, they're going to be able to understand it a lot better than if you just came out and told them.
I was thinking also, because I was taking a course a few months ago on narrative shows, that if you feel absolutely forced to introduce any type of like hard data, you can do so in ways that people can create visual images.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, from that data. So if you're gonna say, oh, we had like 20,000 people, or you can say like, oh, we had the amount of people that fits into a football stadium, for example. So like that visual thing, that visual aspect will help. Not all of the cases, but I think it's going to be an easier way to introduce that into the storytelling aspect.
Yeah, and I think that in itself is like micro storytelling.
Mm-hmm.
If you tell someone like, envision that you are in a football stadium and how many people are surrounded by you, like that is in itself a story that puts them. The whole purpose of storytelling is to drive human connection, and human connection is driven by shared experiences. So if you tell someone like, put yourself in the mindset of you're in this football stadium, they're going back to that time and they're putting themselves in that story. They're putting themselves in that memory, and it's a memory that everybody will share. And so you guys are all just coming in with this one shared experience. And that's enough to be a story. You don't have to have the beginning, middle, and end, the plot, the characters. Just introduce a memory and the rest kind of tells itself.
Mm-hmm. All right. I know you have a book where you cover this in depth. We're going to talk about it. But before we dive into that, I'm thinking in terms of, as a podcast host, who runs an interview-based show, what are types of questions, or how can I structure my interviews in a way that they are story-driven, not just like random conversations or maybe data-driven conversations around a particular topic?
Yeah, I think jumping back to having that strategy and what do you want that purpose to be? What do you want the through line for all of these episodes, all of these conversations? What do you want them to be about? And asking questions that are a little deeper. Like, don't just ask what is this and what happened, but why and how. And just, this isn't necessarily about what did you do, but why did you do it? How did you do it? What happened next? And I think we kind of get stuck on that first question of just, so what happened? And we don't dig into that further. So you can have an entire podcast episode with just one question because there's so many layers to it. So if you ask me like what happened, and then I start to tell you, and then you dig deeper, you ask more questions, you start to really just hone in on whatever that unique listening proposition is for that show. And you just get deeper and deeper. I know for some people it's easy, for some people it's hard. I don't think I've ever answered a question with a yes or a no. I don't do yes or no questions. Every single time you ask me a question, I'm going to answer it with a story, whether you want me to or not. And I apologize, but I also don't at the same time, because that's what I do. And I'm used to this medium, and this medium is for stories. So some of it's going to be a challenge if you bring guests on that aren't storytellers, that are, it's like pulling teeth when you try to get them to say more than just a yes or no question. So I think not giving the option for it to be a yes or no, and making sure that with every question you have like follow-up questions ready that just go deeper and deeper and deeper into one very specific aspect of it. And that's going to tie back to that strategy you have for the show.
Okay, well, what you're saying, I'm thinking of two aspects of the conversation. One is, I think it's an issue with a lot of podcasters in areas like finance and that stuff. Like, you focus too much on the result, like how did you get to the result, but not in the why, for example. So that's a very interesting take. Also focus on the why so you can get the full story. And the other, oh my God, I lost my train of thought. It happens all the time.
You're fine. There's actually a whole chapter of my book is just about figuring out what your why is. And
Yeah.
I have exercises in the book that are all just questions to ask yourself to figure out what your why is.
Yeah.
And really just hone in on that yourself. Because if you're struggling to answer the same questions that you're asking other people, then you're not going to have as good of a conversation, because conversations are two-way. It's not just asking questions and getting answers. It's they give their answer, and then how does that relate to you? How is your experience with that different? And so being able to have it be really conversational. I hate the word interview. I don't think podcasts should be interviews. They should be conversations. And hosts have a tendency to, we call it hide behind the mic. A lot of the times, if you're launching a podcast, it's because you want to be a thought leader. You want to be getting your ideas out there, but all you do is ask questions to other people. So you're hiding behind the mic. You're not actually putting any of your own ideas out there. So being able to have it be very conversational, so you're also sharing thoughts and ideas and not just facilitating somebody else's, is a really important skill to learn.
Yeah, you helped me get back on track in terms of like what I was thinking. I lost my train of thought, but I'm back on track. And it is what you're saying. It's a conversation, and it happens sometimes that the person on the other side of the mic is just gonna give you one sentence answers. That's how they communicate. That's how they process things, and you should not be mad at yourself or mad at the guest or mad at the other person or the situations for that, because it's just how different people communicate. Like, not everybody is a storyteller, and not everybody is going to give you that nice story in that context and that why. They're just going to give you like, okay, this is what happened. Period.
I definitely agree that not everybody is a storyteller, but I think everyone can be. And it's for some people, it feels like a natural skill, but for some people, it does have to be learned. And I mean, that's why I started with like podcast guest coaching and teaching people how to do it and storytelling coaching. But if you take the time to learn how to tell a story, you can be a great storyteller. Great stories happen to those who know how to tell them. So just take that time before you go on a podcast, before you start trying to put out content or get on stages. Take the time to practice and to learn how to do it well. It's just like anything else that you do. You need to practice it. You're not going to nail it on the first try. So everybody is not a storyteller, but they can be.
Sarah, I would like to dive deeper into something you just said, which is a lot of hosts hide behind the mic.
Mm-hmm.
And okay, I'm going to tell you my background so you have an idea of where this comes from. So my background is in foreign language education. I teach English as a foreign language. And there is something that is called teacher talk. Teacher talk is the teacher talking to the students. And that, in that context, should be kept at a minimum, because what you want to do is provide directions and let the students do the talk, not you. And I've kind of applied that into my podcasting. I try to like provide the guiding questions, but let the guests share their knowledge. So like I try not to talk too much or like take too much space in the whole conversation. How can we balance that? Yeah, like maybe it happens sometimes a host takes over the whole conversation, or sometimes they barely ask a few questions. So how can we strike a balance in those two aspects?
Well, part of it is going to be the goals. Like, what is your goal for the show? Are you trying to share your own ideas, or there's people that they start a podcast because they just want to learn from other people and they want to have a platform to ask those questions and to learn. And if that's your goal, then you don't have to be the one answering the questions. You can just act as that facilitator, because it's all about what the goal is. But if it is a goal of yours to share your own ideas and to share your own thoughts, then just kind of forget that the mic is there. Forget that the camera is there. We naturally, when we are having conversations, we're adding our own input. We're adding our own thoughts, because that's just how conversations work. And I think when you have this role of host, or you have this role of interviewer, you get a little bit in your head about it. And you think that you have to have like a really polished list of questions. You have to know exactly where the conversation's going to go. And you don't. I've never had a podcast that I hosted that I had a list of questions. It's just like, I know what you do, and here are things that I want to know about it. And then you said something, and now I want to know more about that. And it's just naturally flowing. And as different things come up, it's going to just naturally jog your memory of, oh, I went through that too. And it's okay to say it. It's okay to add in your perspective. And you want to make sure that you're not overshadowing. Like you said, it is a balance, and you need to find that balance, and letting them lead the answer and have the like first crack at that question. They get to give their answer. You're then adding in like an anecdote from you that leads into another question. Just having a balance and being able to do it in a way that doesn't feel like this is a show just about you or a show just about them. It's just a conversation.
I like that. Okay. We've covered multiple aspects of how to turn podcast interviews into conversations and into storytelling. But as I mentioned earlier, it's a very wide area. You have a book where people can learn more about it. I like you connect all the pieces together: storytelling, podcasting, and thought leadership. Yes, how you can use storytelling and podcasting for thought leadership. Your book covers that. I'm checking the table of contents here. You cover how to use your voice, how to tell a story and how to integrate that with thought leadership. Tell us a little bit more of what we can find in your book and what we can learn or how we can implement it in our brand building processes.
Yeah, thank you. The book it's Open This Book. It's the art of storytelling for aspiring thought leaders. And I kind of take my experience of how I learned how to take a story that I never saw value in and make it valuable for other people. So the purpose of the book is to help you figure out what stories you already have in your arsenal, what stories are just kind of hiding in your memory that you don't think to tell, and figure out the best way to tell them. So there's different storytelling methods. There's elements to a great story. I talk a lot about the experiences that I've had around telling my own stories. I talk about wanting to become a thought leader. I talk about having imposter syndrome, getting past imposter syndrome, finding the topics that excite you the most, diving into creativity and being okay with not knowing all of the answers and still thinking of yourself as an expert. So it talks a little bit about everything, and I try that relates to storytelling and even the neuroscience of storytelling, what's happening in your brain when you're hearing a good story. But I tell it through my own stories. So it's almost a little bit of a memoir, because if I'm going to tell you that you need to teach via stories and I don't teach you via stories, then throw my book out. That's stupid. So it is almost a memoir, lots of stories that really make it easy to understand the concepts that I'm trying to explain. And then it also has thinking exercise and writing prompts so that you can start writing out those stories and actually do it yourself and not just think about it. But there's journal pages, there's writing prompts, there's storytelling prompts and formulas for how to structure stories that you tell and things like that.
That's great. This book we can find on Amazon, and where else can we find it?
Yeah, you can find it on Amazon. You can find it on my website. And if you go to openthisjournal.com, I actually took all of those journal prompts, the writing exercises, and I separated them out and just made them downloadable for free. So if you want to just get a taste for it and see how you can start writing your own story, you can just download the journal entries at openthisjournal.com.
Great. Okay, so for those listening, the link to Sarah's website is going to be there for you to go check the book. I'm also going to add the Amazon link so they can go check it out. Any other places where people can follow you and learn more about how to use storytelling in our branding?
Yeah, if you just go to my website, favoritedaughtermedia.com, all the links to my socials are there. There's free content there, ebooks that you can download, and my contact info is there. You can book time with me, and we could just start talking about your stories and seeing what stories you've been forgetting to tell.
Amazing. So all the links, please go check them out over on the description of this episode. Sara, thank you so much for sharing all the knowledge with us today. And I hope all this information is going to help listeners transform how they create podcasts and conversations.
Thank you for having me.